I'm a forgiveness teacher. What's that? Forgiveness teacher? What? You make a living at that? Well, not really, but I'm still a forgiveness teacher. It's a blessed life that I live, and I want to share a little bit about that with you this morning. So I'm going to take you on a journey, and then I'm going to talk to you about forgiveness, and I'm going to engage in some questions for Q&A for a little while, and at the end of my time, at about 10:25, I'll lead us in a brief meditation. Does that sound okay? You guys ready? Turn to your neighbor and say, I'm glad you're here. Turn to your neighbor and say, I'm glad I'm here. Thank you. I'm not a pastor so much anymore, but I still got the genes. All right. So I'm here to talk about the F word, the new F word, forgiveness. And I hope that when you leave here this morning, you will have a new mantra. And that mantra, I hope, will be, forgiveness is my superpower. Today I want to share with you what forgiveness is and is not, why it's good for you, and how to do it. Forgiveness is my superpower. But first, I want to take you on a journey. Thank you for indulging me. Sometimes I can't help myself. How many of you have been to St. Paul's Chapel in New York City? Okay, I see some hands out there. Excellent. Yeah? Awesome. Well, I used to be the priest at that church. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, in a little church in lower New York City, lower Manhattan, right across the street from the World Trade Center, when 9/11 happened. I started in April of 2001. I had been called to this ancient historic church, the church where George Washington worshiped on the day of his inauguration as our country's first president, and my charge was to create at that church a contemporary worship service, to create a laboratory for contemporary expressions of spirituality. And man, I had the dream job of a lifetime. So on Monday nights in the summer of 2001, I set up a jazz mass. I was so happy. And we brought the lights down low. As you can see, this beautiful church, 1802 Waterford crystal chandeliers. Had a screen in there, which was kind of unusual for 20 years ago. Now it's ubiquitous. So we did everything from R&B to gospel to jazz, and we did maybe what could be described as one of the first expressions of hip-hop in an Episcopal worship session. And we were busting to move all over the place. It was awesome. We took for our motto that if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. But we were supposed to reconvene on September 17th after taking a few weeks off in the summer, and we Thank you. Yeah, I can see people. This is better. We put an ad in the Village Voice, no longer in publication, but it was a great magazine, great newspaper. We put an ad in the Village Voice and to announce our services starting back up September 17th. And this is the cover of the Village Voice in which that ad came out. That regal, old, historic church on the morning of 9/11 was engulfed with ashes and dust and debris. That's Building 5 in the background. So when the first plane hit the first tower, I was in my office zipping off some emails, getting ready to go downstairs. We had scheduled a time with the Archbishop of Wales, Rowan Williams, who later became the Archbishop of Canterbury. He was with us that day to talk about the shape of a holy life. We didn't get to hear him talk about it, but I think we discovered the shape of a holy life is cruciform. It's in the shape of a cross. When the first plane hit the first tower, I was the North Tower. I was in my office. I heard the crack, went to the window and looked out and saw these papers blowing by. Someone said it looked like the Yankees ticker tape parade, but all the edges were burned. My friend John Allen and I went up the street to see what we could do to help out. And we were at the foot of the South Tower, right there on Liberty and Church Streets, when the second plane collided with the South Tower. We had to run, dodging debris, the fireball erupting, the ground shaking. It was terrifying. There was a lot of talk about St. Paul's Chapel because there was not even one window broken at St. Paul's. Those 20th century buildings collapsed across the street, but this 18th century church building stood intact. We lost a tree in the cemetery, which took the brunt of the impact. But that was about it. We had a lot of debris and dust everywhere, but, you can clean that up. This is from the Broadway side of the church looking back. This is the cemetery. We had everything from photographs and computer parts to twisted level-or blinds hanging in the trees. It was about, like 4 or 5 inches deep. So there was a lot of talk about St. Paul's being, a miracle, the miracle of St. Paul's Chapel, because it stood. We took the idea that if St. Paul's Chapel stood, it was a miracle that it stood so that we had a big job to do and we could do it. Not because we're holier than anybody who died across the street. So we took that to heart and we started organizing food service, which we started on the Broadway side of the church. This photograph is affectionately referred to as the barbecue on Broadway. We were serving burgers and hot dogs and anything else that we could get our hands on. And, we were serving probably about 500 meals a day at that point, something like that. But if you look at this photograph, you won't be surprised to hear that the health department had some issues with us. They shut us down twice a day. Now, mind you, if they shut you down once and you have to come back and shut you down twice, that means you cranked everything back up when they left. We did that dance for a few days, and I was livid after a while, and I went over to the police captain at the mobile command unit, and I said, "You got to help us out." He said, "Well, you let me know when they come back." So we let him know when they came back. He came over with about a dozen of his biggest, burliest guys, and they locked arms around the 5 people from the health department. They just marched them off the premises. You never knew what was going to happen at Ground Zero. The next day, one of the police officers said to me, "Well, the last time I checked, Well, he said, we carry guns, and the last time I checked, they don't, so we're good. Yeah. So this is my 40-year-old self at the barbecue on Broadway. I look at this picture sometimes and I think, oh my God, I have the weight of the world on my shoulders. I look at that picture and I think of that Dylan tune, Bob Dylan tune. I was so much older then, but I'm younger than that now. This is my staff. We had 8 full-time people working by the end of the operation, which lasted 8.5 months. We served meals. We moved the food service inside after a while. We had the Waldorf Astoria doing our dinners for us. Zabar's doing gourmet sandwiches for lunch. And the pretty famous chef, David Boulay, doing our breakfasts. He had this triple smoked bacon. I was never late when he was serving breakfast for us. We had a couple of pretty interesting volunteers helping us with the food service. You'll see Hillary Clinton there. We had musicians 3 and 4 times a day playing concerts. We had the firefighters playing when they felt like it. I can't tell you how many versions of Danny Boy I heard. All of them were precious. We had massage therapy and chiropractic care. We had cots for people to sleep. On any given night, we had 100 people sleeping in St. Paul's. And someone sent us teddy bears. Well, for crying out loud, what in the world are we supposed to do with teddy bears? That's what I said when I saw what was in the cases. We got so much stuff. I could go on for all day long and tell you about the stuff we got that you wouldn't believe. The teddy bears, we didn't know what to do with them, so we just put them in the pews to see if anybody wanted to grab a teddy bear. You would not believe the teddy bears were one of our most popular items. These big strapping police officers and firefighters would come in and grab a teddy bear. And I'll never forget one day a cop from New Jersey came in. He was like 6'5". He grabbed 2 teddy bears and took them with him to a cot to take a nap. It was so tender. It was so precious. What happened at St. Paul's Chapel in the middle of all this craziness outside was really a community of love that sought to outdo one another in showing love and kindness. It was a reversal of the world's values, where we had corporate CEOs thrilled to serve coffee to cops. We had, federal judges making sandwiches for sanitation workers. We had bishops of the church mopping the floor. That's a reversal of the world's values. It was incredible. And it was, I like to call it a season of love. And we had cards and letters from all over the world, especially children sending their pictures that they would draw. And it didn't matter where you were on 9/11. You were connected to what happened in New York and Washington and Pennsylvania. You had your connection, and the children had a connection. And you can see that in the children's letters that we had, especially this one. The little guy sees himself cleaning up the mess, helping clean up the mess at the World Trade Center. How do I know that? Look at that word on the side of that crane, Tonka. And then we got this letter. I always love to share this letter. It just is mind-boggling. It's from a little 6th grade girl in Scarsdale, New York. You can't read it, but I'll read it for you. Dear firefighter, there are many deaths that I can die. Cancer, heart attack, AIDS, hepatitis, leukemia, natural causes, choking, being strangled, shot, or hanged. I could get the death penalty, penilty. Rabies or a snake bite or a wild animal could attack me. I could get run over by a car, be in a car crash, fall, slip, and get a concussion, get smallpox or be stabbed and crack my skull, get poisoned, have heart disease, get stung by too many bees, and many, many more. Of course, I can't imagine a whole lot more, but she can, I guess. But I know that I will never, ever die in a fire because people like you brave people would go into the flames to save an ordinary person like me. And that's what makes you so great. Courageous, brave, terrific, wonderful, special people. Isn't that precious? The season of love. We had cards and letters from all over the world hanging in there. This is the Associated Press photograph of the Easter sunrise service at St. Paul's. So it was really extraordinary, indescribable, an amazing experience. But there was also something else that's present in the human condition. I edited this out of the other version. So this is, I did last rites on body bags a lot of days, over 8.5 months, This is from Gary Susan's book, Requiem at Ground Zero. And I took this picture of the cross. But there was a little conflict. Anytime you have humans together, there's going to be conflict. I used to tell my couples in premarital counseling that the only conflict-free existence is death. And they would say, thanks. I thought we were here to plan a wedding. And I tell them, it's not a matter of whether we're going to have conflict or not, it's what we do with it. And forgiveness is the tool that I believe is best suited to help us deal with conflict. So when 9/11 happened, a lot of the leadership at the church where I served scattered and were gone, out of town even, for like 10 days. And I assumed an authority that I really didn't have when I started the work at St. Paul's Chapel. I just saw the need and I stood in the breach. I'd do it all over again. But it created some situations that were not so favorable for me in the long run. There was a lot of worry about liability, about people getting sick, about, who speaks for this church? Is it you or is it the senior guy? And it just created a moral quandary in which we all were trying to do our best. But I felt, and I want to be clear about this, I felt that I didn't get the support that I deserved. And that made me really angry. So I resigned at the end of it. And here's the New York Times article announcing my departure. November 28, 2002. This is an article in Germany's Die Zeit, the sort of equivalent of New York Times in Germany. Das Martyrium des Lyndon Harris, the martyrdom of Lyndon Harris. But a lot of it was self-inflicted wounds. It wasn't that I was pure and they were evil. We were both trying to do our best. And I came out on the short end of the stick and resigned, and I became bitter. And after 9/11, my life fell apart. Like many first responders, I still have nightmares. The trauma is pretty significant. So I found out after serving 240 days at the site, I had significant PTSD and depression. I had all this crap in my lungs. My marriage failed. I lost my house in foreclosure, and I went through bankruptcy. I was angry, depressed, bitter. I put myself in prison. Now, it isn't right that some of the things that happened to me, but it's also not right that I decided to make things a lot worse for myself by putting myself in an emotional prison. I circled the drain for about a decade, and I was not a happy camper. And I could always find someone to play that old game with me, Ain't It Awful? Talk about how awful things were and how awful I was treated and how awful life is. But there's no win in that game. If you're playing that game, the win is to get out of that game because it's hurting you. I heard this quotation from Lou Smedes. To forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover that the prisoner was you. I wish someone had told me that a long time ago. I wish I had had this skill set called forgiveness when I was doing this work at Ground Zero. I wish I had it when I was a teenager. But we're not wired for forgiveness. We're hardwired for revenge, it seems. Do you know that when you think about revenge, the pleasure pathways in your brain light up? The same pathways that light up when you eat chocolate? Maybe that's why they call it sweet revenge. I heard the quotation, Nelson Mandela, that not to forgive is like drinking poison and waiting for your enemies to die from it. I drank a lot of that poison. And I want to be honest with you all this morning. It tasted pretty good. I enjoyed my victim status, maybe a little too much. But the problem is, every time I took a drink of that poison, a part of me died. So, what is forgiveness? You hear the word forgiveness, and folks are, thinking forgive and forget. Forgiveness means letting somebody off the hook for treating me bad. Doesn't mean any of that. Forgiveness is something we do for ourselves that helps us release a heavy burden that we're carrying unnecessarily. I work with the guy named Fred Luskin. He's the director of the Stanford Forgiveness Project at Stanford University. He wrote this book, Forgive for Good. If I had copies of this book, I'd have them here to give to you this morning. But you should definitely get a copy of this book because it's a game changer. It's outsold every book in history on the topic of forgiveness. So what is forgiveness? What is it not? We're going to start with what it's not. Forgiveness is not condoning unkindness. We think that forgiveness means letting them off the hook or like it doesn't really matter how they treated us. Not so. Forgiveness is not forgetting something painful. Forgiveness is, in spite of how painful the memory, I choose to forgive because it's good for me to forgive. You remember the family members of the 9 people who were murdered in Charleston in 2015? Within days, they announced that they were going to forgive the perpetrator. Because, they said, we forgive him, not because he deserves it, but because we deserve peace. Forgiveness is not excusing poor behavior. Forgiveness is not about the person who hurt you. That's a theological understanding. That's a biblical understanding. What I'm working with here is a scientific, evidence-based methodology that's been tried, tested in trials for over 20 years and found wildly successful. Forgiveness is not denying or minimizing your hurt. Forgiveness does not mean reconciling with the offender. This is huge. That's the next step. But for example, we never encourage people to reconcile with abusers, right? Forgive them, yes, because that releases yourself from the burden of that wound, but not reconciliation. Forgiveness doesn't mean you have to give up your feelings. So what is forgiveness? It's a feeling of peace. Stress management is an important part of our forgiveness methodology, and I'll lead you through a process at the end of our time together. Forgiveness is for you and not for the offender. Forgiveness is taking back your power. Victim or hero? The choice is yours. Forgiveness takes responsibility for how you feel. It's about your healing and not the other person. If the other person gets benefit, that's awesome. But it's not fundamentally about anyone else other than yourself. It's a trainable skill, helps us get control over our feelings, it can improve mental and physical health. It's a choice, and everyone can learn to forgive. Forgiveness lowers your blood pressure, lowers your heart rate, increases a sense of peace and well-being, increases joy and creativity. It's good for your health on a par with quitting smoking, one research article that came out about 5 years ago said. Can you believe that? Now, if I told you I had a secret sauce that would give you more peace, that would lower your blood pressure, that would lower your heart rate, that would give you peace so that you can sleep at night, that would enhance your immune system, what would you say? You'd say, sign me up. I want a prescription for that. Well, it's not a secret, and you can do it yourself. Holding a grudge, by the way, is a higher risk indicator for heart attack than hostility. When you hold a grudge, it deepens in your system, in your nervous system, and you nurse it over time, and it gets worse and worse. And it can kill you. It literally can kill you. So I want to connect the dots now between peace within yourself and peace in the world. One of the important reasons we talk about forgiveness is that we want people to find peace. The personal benefit of forgiveness is significant. And if that's all that happened, it would be worth it. But we have a second agenda too, and that is peace in the world. If you're a more peaceful person, you're contributing to a more peaceful world. You know, Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. So if you want to see a peaceful world, be at peace. Forgive your enemies. Let those burdens go. They're too heavy. There's a process. You can work through this process and find peace of mind and serenity. So if you're hung up on something this morning, if you're ruminating on something that happened two weeks ago or 20 years ago, it doesn't matter how long ago it was. If you're still ruminating on it, it's having a significant impact on your nervous system and on your body and on your mental health. By increasing peace in your life through forgiveness, you create ripples that spread out across the world. Mother Teresa said that she's never been to an angrier place than at an anti-war rally in Washington. You know, she said, I'm not going to those anymore. We need to embody the energy we preach about. So if we want kindness in the world, we need to be kind to our neighbor, especially those we don't like. If we want peace in the world, we need to find peace in our own heart and build it in our communities. If we want to find compassion in the world, we need to be more compassionate people. It's that simple. I remember going to Palestine about 5 years ago and traveling along the wall there. Some of you probably have been there too. And I remember seeing for the first time in person the Banksy artwork of the dove of peace with the Kevlar vest on. It's chilling to think about that, isn't it? Jonas Salk asked the question, what is my responsibility for peace in the world? Any guesses?
Peace within yourself.
Close.
Be the peace you want to see in the world.
Close, yeah. Those two things are derivatives, and what he said is, my responsibility for peace in the world is to become a better ancestor for my children. Boom! That hits me between the eyes. How do I become a better ancestor for my children and now my grandchildren? Through forgiveness. I decide to break the cycle of violence and revenge. I decide to take care of my grudges in my generation and not pass them down to my children to fight on my behalf. That's one of the greatest gifts we can give our children and our grandchildren. Through forgiveness, we break the cycle of violence and revenge, and we build a bridge to the future. If you're stuck in your grievance narrative, you're in the past. It's that simple. And what's wrong with that? There ain't no future in it. If we're stuck in our revenge and our grievance narrative, we're stuck in the past. And it's robbing us of our joy today. And we're not as effective as we can be as peacemakers in the world. This isn't I'm not trying to guilt you. I'm preaching to myself because I still struggle with all this. Bishop Tutu said there's no future without forgiveness. At some point, we have to figure out how to break the cycle of violence and revenge. We need to find creative, artistic expressions to do that. It's so important. But we don't see this at the box office. We don't see this in movies. We don't see this coming out of Hollywood. What do we see coming out of Hollywood? These revenge stories where, the good guy finally gets the bad guy in the end and we all cheer. And I love those movies too. I'm not being judgmental about them. But I wonder, is there a way for us to have creative artistic expressions that talk about peacemaking and kindness and compassion? I think it's up to our artists, our musicians, our cinematographers, our producers, our playwrights to help us create this world. So if you know someone who's in that category, or who's a painter, or maybe you are yourself, I'm throwing down the gauntlet to you this morning. Please, we need you. So I'm not going to do this just yet. This is what I'm going to do at the end, but I want to stop for a minute now and take some questions. So, or comments. What do you say? Yes.
Well, I was struck by your account of Kelbar, and I'm putting myself in the position of a Palestinian who's living in a refugee camp. And I want to give up the idea of revenge. Well, what does that mean as I do with my politics? Because I don't like the way I'm living now. I don't like the way my children live.
You have to repeat it.
I'll repeat it. The question is the Kevlar vest on the dove of peace. What does it mean for a Palestinian young person to think about giving up revenge, giving up these attempts at violence in order to liberate themselves from an oppressive situation? We become what we don't forgive. And in a way, like for example, at the trying to remember the refugee settlement that I was working with, Al Rawad, and it's the biggest refugee camp in Palestine. And the director of the community center there is this absolutely amazing man, PhD from NYU and drama studies, just brilliant. And he has come up with this idea that he calls creative resistance. Creative resistance. It's the same thing Dr. King was talking about, Dr. King was talking about these issues in America. Nonviolent social transformation is what we're trying to shoot for, Because if we only focus on the negative, if we only focus on how bad things are, and things are bad there, I've seen firsthand, if we only focus on that, then we have a very small, limited range of responses to make. But if we open our hearts a little wider, and I'm not telling them to open their hearts, who am I to tell them what to do? But in my life, I've discovered that if I open my heart a little wider to see maybe some other things other than just the horror of what's going on, then I have more options in my response. So creative resistance is the model, I think, for that response. We went to the wall. How many of you have been to Palestine? Awesome. Have you been to the Walled-Off Hotel? There's a hotel right beside one of the walls, and it's where Banksy's art exhibit is. It's called the Walled-Off Hotel. And right next to it, you can buy your spray paint cans so that you can tag the wall yourself. You could buy that at a place called Walmart. But one of the most beautiful images I saw on the Banksy exhibit is the image of the guy who looks like he's throwing a Molotov cocktail. You guys have seen this? But it's not a Molotov cocktail, it's a bouquet of flowers. We have to lean on our artists to help us create a new vision for the world, because violence against violence, it's just gonna, Gandhi said it best. An eye for an eye leaves both eyes blind, and there's already too much blindness in the world. What else? Yes?
So, like one of your slides, you said how forgiveness is not accepting violence or accepting pain or forgiving your person who's inflicting pain on you. So how do you even forgive, so are we going to have a lot of refugee children who are going to come from Afghanistan and Florida, and we're kind of trying to have a committee where we can take care of them. And it includes a lot of children who will be coming without parents.
Yeah.
So how do you even begin to help them in a situation like this? I mean, how do you tell them to forgive? I don't know.
Well, my first thought is I wouldn't tell them to forgive. I would tell them, thank God you're here, and let's see what we can do to help you put your life back together, and I'm so sorry for what you've been through. Forgiveness is not something you go to immediately. For example, Thich Nhat Hanh says that if we forgive before we're over being angry about something, then it's worse for us in the long run, because it'll just come back. But there comes a time where we have to realize there's a limit too, anger is like battery acid that corrodes the container it's kept in. If we hold that anger in our hearts, it compromises our health and does serious damage to us. So it's counterintuitive, I get that. But if you're willing to open your eyes and heart to a counterintuitive approach to the world, then I think it can be really helpful. But the Afghan children, my first thought is, I'm really sorry. I'm horrified by what's happened to you. And how can I help? I work with a little Unitarian fellowship in Tryon, North Carolina, and we're examining, we're digging in, trying to figure out how we can help Afghan refugees. It's a huge need. It's a huge need. Yeah. What else? Yes?
It may be very selfish, but I'm not thinking of the world right now. You were speaking to me about my relationship with my dead mother.
Okay.
And
yeah.
If you look at me, you would not suspect heart disease, high blood pressure. What was the other one? The pulse rate?
Yeah.
You were speaking to me.
Okay.
So I'm thinking, before we go globally, sometimes we have to go personal.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
Do you have, and I guess you went through that too.
Yeah.
But I don't know, many of us may in fact have these relationships.
Yep.
We have to work through.
All of us do.
Yeah.
All of us do. Absolutely. And the thing about your dead mother is she's still renting out space in your brain, in your head, rent-free, and asking you...
Anybody else relate to my comment?
Who else can relate to this? It can be your mother, it can be your father, you can be your ex, yeah. I mean, this is what it means to be human. We all have this. And so what we do about it is really the key. And again, starting with ourselves, finding peace in our own hearts helps us create ripple effects that are out in the world. Yes?
It looks like you're getting ready to move on to some techniques we can employ to work on it. Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, I was just telling Mary, if I had thought about it far enough in advance, I would have tried to offer a workshop for today. And I'm going to be around. I just have to run into town for one quick thing. But I'm going to be around and be happy to have a circle whenever there's a free time in the calendar, and we can work through some of these steps. Yeah. Yeah.
I'd just like to comment from my personal experience that I had two situations that were horrible and made me very angry and hurt and all of that. And I knew all of this about forgiveness being the right way and good for you, but I tried, and I mean over years and years, and somehow I had not forgiven. And then in one instance, I started having forgiveness dreams about the individuals involved.
Wow.
And I would wake up and it would be off my shoulders.
Wow.
And
So
in
your brain
another
knew what to
case-
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
incredible.
it takes a lot of time. In the other case,
Yeah.
it was a case of abuse by my father when I was a child.
Yeah.
And I had tried to forgive and all of this and all of that. And when he was in his last weeks, somehow in the middle of the night, I woke up and I started screaming, I forgive you, I forgive you. And I just went into a...
Wow.
And the next morning, he died.
Wow.
And these
That's
things...
incredible.
And still, when you say these things, I
Yeah.
still have residual,
Yeah.
you know, but a lot was lifted off. And I think
Yeah.
releasing yourself of the it's your choice kind of thing and making that choice over and over and realizing it will probably take half a lifetime at least.
It's not a quick fix.
No.
You can see quick relief, but it takes a lot of work to really go down deep. And a lot of the stuff, like the trauma, you know, that's stored in a part of our brain that's not even accessible by language. So working with a trauma counselor is really important, you know. And I mean, Bessel van der Kolk is one of the gurus of trauma. He wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And the body does keep the score. He says there are 4 things that are effective in dealing with trauma. See if I can get them. Thank you.
Also, someone's asking if we can repeat the questions.
Oh.
At home audience.
Thank you. Will do. Absolutely. 4 things effective in the treatment of trauma: yoga, massage therapy, acupuncture, and a form of therapy called EMDR, eye movement desensitization, or something like that. And EMDR, I did it after 9/11. Probably saved my life. Yeah. And then the forgiveness stuff. Yeah.
So there's a number of questions that are coming over Zoom.
Okay.
I'll just start with the first one, which is a comment. It says, Lyndon, thank you for this message. I need it every day. I'm facing my satisfaction in despising political parties.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so then the first question is, so if there is still anger left, what are the steps to real forgiveness?
Yeah. What to do with that anger? You know, you guys remember the Atkins diet? Yeah. Many years ago, I lost 20 pounds on the Atkins diet. I love the Atkins diet. If I had too much pasta one day, I'd have to eat a pound of bacon the next day to make up for it. That was my kind of diet. And after I lost, of course I gained the weight back. But after I lost the weight, I went to the grocery store and I picked up 4 or 5 pound bags of sugar just to kind of see the weight that my body was carrying. And since then I've thought about that. How much weight is your body carrying, emotional weight, that you don't need to carry? And are you willing to let it go? The challenge becomes this, and I'll tell you, from personal experience, I was loyal to my suffering. It was my identity. And when you're loyal to your suffering, that becomes your identity. There's a word for that. It's called victim. We all have been victimized, but it's our choice as to whether we remain a victim. When we're a victim, the story is always about someone else and what they did to us, and how awful my life is because of that. Stephen Cartman's a psychologist who wrote about the dreaded drama triangle. And I'm just going to talk about the 2 principal points in the triangles. On the one triangle, you have the victim, the person who is sort of passive and repeats. Yet, Jack Kornfield says the thoughts that you have every day, 98% of them are the same thoughts you had yesterday. We need to think some new thoughts. We need to be willing to open our hearts to it. So when we're a victim, we're living in the past in someone else's story, and we have no power. But when you choose your own agency and your own power by letting some stuff go, you become the hero on your own journey, and you're forward-looking to the future and embracing it. But our loyalty to our suffering is the biggest thing. It was tough for me. Yes?
Yeah, that opens like quite a door for me. I just recently slipped in a bathroom, and somebody had walked out and not told me that the bathroom was wet. And I remember that I was in shock. And I think from what you're saying, when you keep running that reel, you're kind of in shock, and you can't get out of it. So it's like it's a choice to find what gets you out of it. And if you ask, you will get an answer. Like I've come to that conclusion too. So sometimes it's not like I just have to drink water at that moment, but I never forget that shock feeling.
Yeah.
And what you were saying, like people said after it, oh, you were like playing the victim role so badly. And I was like, I wasn't playing it. I was in shock.
Yeah.
Did you recognize that?
Yeah.
And what you're saying is, to me, is like when you choose to play that victim role, it's not a choice. It's like you're still in shock.
Mm-hmm.
And you cannot get out. Like it's a real that you're running,
Yeah.
like you're saying.
Well, that's certainly true of trauma and trauma like that. Yeah. But if someone cuts me off in traffic and I'm still complaining about it, 10 days later, that's kind of on me, and that's a typical thing, the kind of stuff we carry around every day. And guess what? It has as much impact on our nervous system as anything else, because our body doesn't distinguish between what's happened to us, on that level anyway. If there's something we're angry about, the stress chemicals are dropped into our body, it responds. Yeah.
Okay. Another question from our Zoom folks. I visited a Servas host family in Hiroshima and was wondering, how can people forgive this kind of destruction? How does one move on from the perception of personally unforgivable events?
Great question. The great question is, the person visited with Servas families in Hiroshima and is asking, how do we move on from unforgivable events like Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Well, I would say let's follow the example of the Hiroshima widows, a group that came to St. Paul's Chapel after 9/11. They came bearing a message of peace and of forgiveness. Like I said, forgiveness doesn't mean letting people off the hook. Prosecute them if there's a way to do it, if it's justified. It doesn't mean saying that these things are okay. I would categorize this, part of the talks I sometimes do are on tragedy. And the definition I use for tragedy is something that can't be fixed, You can't unring a bell, you can't turn back the hands on a clock. It's done, it's over. You have to figure out a way to live with it. And that's painful to acknowledge. But even though a tragedy can't be fixed, a tragedy through a loving community can be healed. And that's our obligation now, to be a loving, compassionate community, making amends for the mistakes that we've made in the world. Afghanistan, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, whatever it is. Iraq, we have a lot to make amends for. And it's an opportunity for us. So, yeah. What else? Yeah.
You've said that forgiveness is about the future.
Mm-hmm.
And also that we are hardwired to want vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just as satisfying. Vigilante movies are a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So what in your thinking can you give us about avoiding victimhood feelings in the future and thereby avoiding the need for vengeance at all? So if forgiveness is about the future, how do we deal with people to avoid exposing ourselves to those self-righteous feelings of victimhood, so that you don't have to worry about forgiveness in the first place.
Thank you for that question. The question is, how do we deal with this desire for revenge, to incorporate a forgiveness practice so that we don't get ourselves into victim-like scenarios in the future? Thank you for that question. It's very insightful, and I want to give some background to my response. To be clear, forgiveness is what we do in the present. It changes the future, you know. We can't change the past, but we can change the future by what we do in the present. So forgiveness is something we can only do in the present. But doing it in the present sets us up for more success in the future. I don't think there's a way to short circuit that potential for more crises later on, because when something bad happens to you, when something bad happens to us, we should feel angry or upset. That's a really important part of our emotional response. The problem is when we stay there for 10 years, you know. These things don't come with an extended warranty unless we give it one. And that's where the forgiveness work comes in. Yeah.
My answer would be, I say to Spirit, can you show me this a different way?
Mm-hmm.
And then something shows up on my path and I go, whoa.
Yeah.
So when you ask, you do get an answer.
Ask for Spirit to give.
I don't always like the answer.
Right.
The whole other stories, but you do get an answer.
Yeah. The comment is that when we ask for Spirit to give us an answer, that answer will be forthcoming. Yeah. You know, what's a miracle? A miracle, according to A Course in Miracles, is a reframe. It's a change of mind, a change of heart. That's what we're talking about here. Now, I'm going to lead you through a really quick exercise, and if you have some paper, that would be the best. Just scratch paper. If you don't, you can do it in your head, but it's easier if you can write some things down. Just a couple minutes.
On the back of your programs, there's 2 blank pages.
2 blank pages on the back of the program. Awesome. Yeah. Good. Oh, it's full. You won't need much space to do this, but so we talk about grievances, and I want to walk you through the process of creating a grievance and then help you understand how to dismantle your grievance. Now, I'd like for you to think about something. Think about a grievance that you have, a recent non-nuclear level grievance. We're not talking about ex-wife or mother-in-law or son-in-law. Just something minimal, like I got cut off in traffic, okay? Or I went to the grocery store, I was in a really big hurry, and the woman in front of me in the 10 items or less lane had a whole basket full of groceries. These nuisances, you know, that can kind of like just set our teeth on edge. Think of one of those. Everybody got one? I mean, if you don't have one, you might not be paying attention, because life is always abundant in these sorts of things. So write that down. Just a few sentence fragments. It's just only for you to see. Just write it down. What happened? What was it? Okay, draw a line underneath that and write down how you felt about what happened. Emotion words. I was angry, I was upset, I was hurt, I was sad, whatever it was. Okay? Draw a line under that, if you will, please. And now write down what you did in response to what happened. So, the guy cut me off in traffic. I was really upset. So I caught up with him and cut him off in traffic. Whatever it is you did, it's okay to poke fun at yourself. Everybody got that? All right. Now, in that last category, the things that you did in response to what happened, I'd like for you to place a check mark beside everything you did that actually changed what happened. That's a trick question, yes. There's nothing you can do that will change what happened. I've got an advanced degree in trying to change the past. I haven't graduated. It's impossible. Maybe you do too. Lily Tomlin, the comedian, said it best. Forgiveness means giving up all hope of a better past. There's nothing we can do about it. What we can do is how we take that past into our future, how we allow that past to manifest itself in our present. And that's up to us. We have decisions. We can make other decisions than the ones that we have been making for a while. Basically, I want to say this. Forgiveness, in its essence, is making peace with the word no. You know, you wanted this, but life gave you this. You wanted this, life gave you this, there's a gap. You didn't get what you wanted, or something you were counting on to happen didn't happen. And that's hard. That's a loss. We grieve. We go through the stages of grief. You know, we're angry, we bargain, you know, all the stages of grief. We deal with that. There are many ways to bridge that gap. Addictions, that's one really good way. Or it isn't effective, but a lot of people choose it. To anesthetize the pain. Drama in relationships, you know. I didn't get what I wanted, but it's their fault. Your fault, I didn't get what I wanted. You held me back in life. You know, all kinds of options to making peace in that gap. But forgiveness is the healthy one that enables us to deal with life's inevitable tragedies. I mean, brothers and sisters, let me tell you, and this is the truth, the biggest problem with life is none of us are going to get out alive. Forgiveness helps us make peace with that fact, to acknowledge that we are finite, we are mortal, so that what time we have left, we see it as precious. I don't want to spend a drop of my life. I don't want to spend a drop of my life wasting it on what's happened to me in the past. Life is too precious. Whatever time we have, let's be grateful for it. And in all honesty, the antithesis or the antidote to non-forgiveness is gratitude. To focus on gratitude. Because we don't know the whole picture. And we can't assume that we know the whole picture. That guy who cut me off in traffic, I saw him as a jerk, right? Talked about the jerk who cut me off in traffic when I got to work that day, you know. But who am I to say if he's a jerk or not? Maybe he's a pediatric surgeon on his way to the hospital to do an emergency surgery to save my little grandnephew's life. I don't know. You don't know. Benefit of the doubt. We make assumptions, and those assumptions are lethal. Okay, one more question, then I want to wrap it up. Yes?
I think it was something that, like, I mean, yeah, it comes to my bank account, but let's say, you know, you're sexually abused or something.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you can't follow that because the intentions, no.
Yeah. The question is, how do you deal with sexual abuse and horrible things like that? Very tenderly and very compassionately. For example, when we work with victims of domestic violence, we encourage forgiveness, but we don't encourage reconciliation. We don't encourage people to go back into abusive relationships, whether it's a parent or whether it's an ex-partner or if it's a friend. We don't encourage that. It's not healthy. We do encourage forgiveness because what happens when we choose forgiveness is we sever that energetic bond with the perpetrator, and we're able to release it and let it go. And that gives more life to us. It's not fair, and Nelson Mandela said this too, it's not fair for me, no, this is Dalai Lama, it's not fair after having so much taken from me, so much of my joy taken from me, that I spend the rest of my life miserable because of that. The people, the family members of the church in Charleston, of the 9 people who were killed in 2015, said, I forgive, not because he deserves it, but because I deserve peace. And I'm going to give that gift to myself. That's a gift that you can give to yourself. And by doing that, you create these amazing ripple effects in the world. Have you ever bumped into a person who's just like so full of peace and joy? And you think, man, I want some of that. Especially if you're having a bad day. That's a healing moment. We can be, and we are, that person for others. Forgiveness can empower us to do it also. So I'm going to ask you we have just a couple minutes. I'm going to ask you to participate in one of our exercises. So we do trainings about 6 topics, and part of the training is that we invite people to do stress management exercises because to be technical about it, we do a form of narrative therapy. We reframe our story. Cognitive disputation. We challenge assumptions that we make, like the guy who cut me off in traffic might not have been a jerk. Maybe he was an emergency surgeon. We challenge those things, and then we incorporate, and we have a few other things as well, but we incorporate a stress management practice called PERT, Positive Emotion Refocusing Technique. And I'd like to walk you through that experience now. And I have a little bit of music to play. If we could play it really low, please, in the background. Okay? Just really low. Okay. This is a song that was written by Peter Ostrushko and was dedicated to the staff at St. Paul's on Prairie Home Companion way back in the day. It's a beautiful song that helps us open our hearts. Now, I'd like for you just to sit, if you're able to put your feet on the floor and feel your connection, your grounding to the earth. Welcome to close your eyes. Try to make sure that your shoulders are not tense or less tense than they are. If they are, just relax. I'm going to ask you to take some deep breaths. Deep inhalations that fill your abdomen with air. Fill your belly full of air, not your chest. It can go there too, but especially your abdomen. So take a deep, deep breath. And as you exhale, make sure your abdomen, your belly contracts with the exhale. And let's just take a few breaths like that right now. Take some more breaths. And now I invite you to bring into your awareness whatever challenges you may be facing right now. Just pick one. You don't have to do them all, just pick one. Bring it into your awareness and say hello. The ancient Stoics would put it this way: the obstacle is the way. So whatever obstacles you're facing now, bring them into your awareness and say hello. Continue your deep breathing. And after a couple of breaths, just let that go. Continue breathing. Relax your shoulders. Feel peace in your heart. Now I'd like for you to bring into your awareness the face of someone that you know beyond any shadow of a doubt loves you. Maybe it's your mother, maybe it's your grandmother or grandfather, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your child who you love unconditionally. Bring that person's face into your mind's awareness, and I invite you to feel the warmth in your heart by placing your hand over your heart. Feel that and breathe deeply. Inhale that. Cherish that image. Cherish that love. And now just let that go. And take a couple more breaths. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel the love in your heart. Take another breath and then bring your awareness back to the group. Open your eyes when you're ready. So that's just one of our stress management techniques that we use in our forgiveness trainings. That, by the way, is available to you any time of the day. It's a practice that you can adapt for your own lifestyle, your own life. You can teach it to others. When you breathe deeply in of that peace, you're becoming more peaceful, and you're creating these ripples of peace in the world. Be the change you wish to see in the world. Breathe in that peace. It takes us to our hearts. You know, the ego is always scanning the horizon for threats. It's important that it do that because that keeps us safe. It helps us protect ourselves when we see threats. The research shows, as Fred Luskin points out, that the only way that your body can relax and rest is that it's related to the depth of your breathing and the slow pace of your breathing. When you're able to do that, your body relaxes. And when you feel that peace, and when you see the face of the person that you love, or a beautiful waterfall, or a walk in nature, or a sunset on the beach, whatever it is that brings you joy in life, when you feel that in your heart, you're feeling what forgiveness has for you. You're feeling this new reality. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. It's a practice. We don't forgive once and for always. It's a choice every single day. We may forgive some horrible thing that's happened to us, and the next day it comes back to us again, asking for another round of forgiveness. We can do that. And little by little, over time, you'll notice a difference in your life, your health, in your relationships, in your world, in your community, and it's a blessed thing. So I think I have one more slide. This is me. This is my business card. Very subtle, isn't it? I invite you to reach out to me if you'd like. I'll be around today. We can talk if that's useful. Parting word I'll say is that when you're on the playground, on the monkey bars in the playground of life, and you're in the middle of the monkey bars and you're stuck, you know that posture? How do you move forward? You got to let go of that one behind you and reach for the next one, right? Life is too precious to stay stuck. It's a gift for us to enjoy and to share with others, to make lives of other people better. Afghan refugees, Rwandan genocide victims, whoever it is that is within your circle of influence and care. You know, we are blessed to be able to do these kinds of events and this kind of work, but it's not a blessing that we hoard for ourselves. In the Jewish understanding of blessing, it's reflexive. We are blessed so that we may be blessings to others. Thank you.